Welcome to Oyate Today. Oyate in Lakota means people. Brought to you by Native Sun News Today. Hi, welcome to Oyate Today. I'm your host, Richie Richards. Oyate Today is produced by Tim and Jackie Gallego. Tim is an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Our guest tonight is Mr. Bill Walsh, and thank you so much for being here tonight, sir.
Thank you, Richie.
And this is going to be a great discussion. I'm glad you're here.
So, what do we got, 3 hours?
Hey, I wish. We could do it in 3 hours for sure. But tell us a little bit about yourself for those of our viewers who have not heard of you.
Sure. Well, I come from Mitchell, South Dakota, and my father came from the Celtic tribe, the Irish tribe.
Nice.
And my mother was a Bohemian. And I was raised in Mitchell. Not much contact with Native Americans. The big contact is I went to the Catholic school in Mitchell, Mitchell, Notre Dame, and the big contact was in late January when we would have the Catholic basketball tournament in Mitchell, South Dakota at the Corn Palace.
Yeah.
And that was really my opportunity to rub shoulders with Native Americans, and you know, we had Holy Rosary from Pine Ridge, St. Francis from Rosebud, Stefan from up there close to Pierre, and one other Catholic school, I can't remember right now, but it was great to play basketball against those guys. And I got to tell you a story. In the Corn Palace, the visitor locker room, you had to go buy it to get to the home team locker room. And one game at halftime back in remember this is the late 50s, I passed the visitor locker room, and who's in there but Emil Redfish? And he's passing out cigarettes to all the Native Americans, and they all had tattoos on their arms.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, about half of these guys had been to Korea, because I know they were in their late or middle 20s when they played against us, and I was scared deathless against some of those guys, because run and shoot.
Oh.
And they're a great basketball team, and I got to tell you, I had great impressions, because Native Americans all came to Mitchell, South Dakota, all dressed up, and very presentable, great cheerleaders. I always looked at the cheerleaders, see how good looking they were.
Sure,
you know?
sure.
And they even dated some of our girls. That made me angry, you know. So, especially the guys from St. Francis over at Rosebud. They were dating our girls. Before that, I grew up with Leon Kirky. I think he was the only Native American that I really knew of in Mitchell. That was on the baseball team. And I would walk by Naven's Bar in the early 50s, and there was a big sign on the bar that said, "We will not serve any Native Americans." You know, that was all changed in the 50s due to the legislature. My mother, God bless her soul, she would get all kinds of solicitations from the mission schools. I don't know how good that was, because they always showed the mission schools being so poor. I know that they were poor. But I also thought it was sort of a paternalistic downgrading of a lot of Native Americans. So we had two opposite views. One of the poverty of the reservation system, and two of the young Native Americans that I ran into at the Catholic basketball tournament.
So you had these really, really good-looking Indian men that were playing good basketball, and these really poor children from the mission schools.
Exactly.
And that was your...
that was my image. And that went throughout high school, and in college, I only went to school I went to St. John's up in Collegeville, Minnesota, and Ed McGaw had gone previously up there, and Big Ed, you know Ed, he was a good writer and a Marine. He always wore that Marine jacket, because my experience, Native Americans love being a warrior, and they're very proud of that heritage. And I think one of the most successful civil rights demonstrations is when Governor Rounds had all the Vietnam veterans come to Pierre. You had 9 flatbeds 9 flatbeds of Native Americans from each tribe, from each reservation in South Dakota that was in that parade.
Wow.
And you know what? People rose out of their chairs and clapped for all those guys. I thought it was one of the better communications between whites and Native Americans, and how proud we are of the Native American warriors and their military service. And that's demonstrated when you go to like Cheyenne Eagle Butte, to the tribal headquarters, and you see all the Native Americans on the wall there.
Yeah.
And I even had a Native American woman, Arlene O'Leary from Timber Lake, whose grandson was Native American, who forget, Tyler, I think was his name, who died in Vietnam. And most recently, and I know we're getting off subject, but most recently I had Hank Gallagher, a classmate of mine, who came out from Washington, D.C., and I lined him up with a bunch of Native American spiritual leaders, sure. Art Zimiga especially, and a couple of other guys up at Bear Butte, because they were having a treaty up there. And so he was able to get into the mind of some of the leaders up there, not only Army veterans, but Native American spiritual men, because he's writing a book about Vietnam and a warrior who, over there. But I don't want to get off that subject. But
sure.
So it's interesting being on the edge, as you've been sort of on the edge in your career, and yet making the contribution and seeing the history develop with regards to Native Americans. You know, I used to go down to Pine Ridge and go to confession to Dick Pates, great Jesuit priest.
Yeah.
First guy to bring housing to the Pine Ridge Reservation. And he would say, "Oh, Bill, I just spend most of my time burying people."
Yeah.
And at the same time, he could see the progress being made with regards to Native Americans on the reservation system. And that's developed a long ways from '61 when I went through Pine Ridge Reservation, and all I saw was tar paper shacks and the poverty of those people. But,
lots of progress, definitely. Tell me about your early years in the ministry then. I understood you started off in Salem, South Dakota.
Right. And I started off at St. Mary's in Salem, and we had 3 groups of what we called the Christian Family Movement every Sunday night, 6 couples in each group. And this one group especially contained Dick Knipe and Nancy Knipe, who later on would become the governor, of a 3-time Democratic governor of the state of South Dakota.
Sure.
And Dick and Nancy and I became very close friends. And we talked about the social gospel a lot. We would read scripture and then try to apply it to our daily lives. And at that time, in the civil rights movement, some of the cities were burning down from African Americans really getting teed off and had enough. And I kept saying to Dick and Nancy and the rest of the group, Native Americans are going to sooner or later say, "I've had enough. I'm taking the law into my own hands. We've got to make a statement." So Dick always was committed to social justice. And when he was governor, I remember the night he was elected, he said, "Bill, I know I haven't talked about this during the campaign, but just watch me." And I watched him during his 8 years of being a governor, and he appointed the first Don Loudner from Mitchell as first Native American cabinet member of his cabinet. It was really I know these are little things, but they're really breakthroughs.
They're monumental at the time.
They're monumental, and Don was a good cabinet member, and I believe we now have the last 2 or 3 governors have appointed somebody very strong in that position in the South Dakota legislature. Besides that, Richie, would you believe that we would have a Native American as the minority Senate leader of the South Dakota legislature?
Oh, that's something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a major breakthrough.
Definitely.
And Troy Heinert is one of the most knowledgeable legislators I've ever run into.
He's doing a great job.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
Mr. Walsh, we're going to take a break,
Yeah.
though, but when we get back, let's talk a little bit more about your ministry and your relationship to American Indians here in South Dakota. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
Native Sun News has been voted the best weekly newspaper in its class for 2015 by the South Dakota and North Dakota Newspaper Associations. You can find a copy of the Native Sun News at many businesses and vending machines in Rapid City and the surrounding area, and on all 9 reservations. We publish every Wednesday, so advertisers and subscribers can reach our diverse readership by calling 605-721-1266. The Native Sun News covers the other side of the story.
You can't predict life's ups and downs. You just give it all you've got to stay on top. But it's easier with a partner like Security First Bank. Since 1898, we've been riding with you through the country's biggest ups and downs. And this is where we'll stay. Security First Bank, a relationship you can count on. Member FDIC.
I used to think news is news. It's all the same. But it's not. There's a big difference between local broadcast news and cable news. See, local stations are part of my community, connecting me to local news, weather, and sports on every device. It makes sense. Get the news from the people I trust who actually live here. No agenda, no bias like on cable shout shows or social media, just facts. For news I can trust, I stay local. Support your local stations. Text TV to 52886 today.
Thank you.
Kindness. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Hi, welcome back to Oyate Today. Once again, our guest tonight is Mr. Bill Walsh. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
It's a joy.
And
it's an absolute joy.
I've definitely enjoyed our conversation. Now, you were at Little Flower in Sioux Falls as part of your ministry.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, it was a parish consisting mainly of morale workers. And at that time, there were some of the highest paid workers in South Dakota, and I still maintain that due to the 1935-36 morale strike by Sioux Falls has always been a very progressive city because they raised the wages of all those people working at morales. But anyway, I used the church basement there to reach out to people. And so every night during the week, I had a different group of people on the fringe.
Sure.
Native Americans had one night because they didn't even know how to punch a time clock when they came into Sioux Falls. We taught them small things, and we gave them a place to meet. Also, the African Americans, NAACP, met there one night a week. We had the Welfare Rights Mothers, Veda Thomas and that wonderful crew of Welfare Rights Mothers. They met there one day a week. And then I taught speaking to a lot of young workers in Sioux Falls. So I was close to a lot of Native Americans. And I taught Native Americans at the School for Deaf.
Wow. Okay.
In Sioux Falls, which is really a trick. I mean, either teaching deaf children or teaching Tim Gallego. I don't know which one is more challenging, you know. And so anyway, when the film came out with Richard Harris, what was the name of that film?
A Man Called Horse.
A Man Called Horse. I had just come from the Chicago convention, the demonstrations there, with Dick Knipe, by the way. And some of the Native Americans in South Dakota said, well, why aren't we getting free tickets to this show? Because the Native Americans on Pine Ridge got free tickets to the show. And I said, well, let's protest this thing. So Robert Penn, who was going to Augustana College and a great artist, he made up these signs, and we went in and protested this movie, and we got all free tickets for our Native Americans
in Sioux
Falls, South Dakota. That was the first big protest. When the Native Americans, when the AIM movement took over Augustana College, Administration College, 1969, the local Native Americans said, well, get a hold of Father Bill. You know, he's a friend of ours. And so Dennis Banks called me up. One of 2 times he called me up, 3 times. And he said, would you come out here? We've got people driving by this administration building and really threatening us. And I said, sure. And so I went out there. I didn't sleep there, but I spent 3 days with the Native Americans. And their main purpose was to make a statement. We're just not going to take it anymore. And I remember the humor of the Native Americans. This is the thing that really came across big.
Yeah.
Because they were always joking behind the scenes. They would put on this image of these strong warriors. Yeah. And then as soon as the cameras went off, they went back to joking.
Teasing and joking.
With one another. And they finally ceased that occupation by coming up with the 10 Commandments that the Lutheran Church had broken.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted, and it was hilarious.
So they weren't really protesting the college then, they were protesting the Lutheran Church then?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
And then Augustana College, great college, by the way, was basically a Lutheran church. So that led to more social activism as I went to St. Joseph's Cathedral. And I got to tell you this story. I was still working with Native Americans, and Dennis Bank came and lived with us for a couple of days. And right before the takeover of Wounded Knee, I took a group of people out to let them experience a Sundance on Pine Ridge, and the Jesuits shut it down. And for whatever reason, one of the guys was a Vietnam veteran, and he had a parachute. And so we set up this parachute, and we all got in there. You know, liberals like me and many of these Native Americans, and they start talking about Bobby Kennedy. And, you know, because he had just been assassinated, and how he was the last great white hope for bringing Native Americans making progress. And we were passing the jug around, and it got so much emotional that I had to get up and leave. So when Banks called me up again and said, Father Bill, get in here to Wounded Knee, I said, I'll be on the next plane out. I went in with Dave Dillinger and Bill Kunstler, the great lawyer. And as we passed first the FBI, and then we passed the Native Americans who were holding guard at Pine Ridge, I looked up. Here was 4 or 5 of the guys that were in the parachute with me just a year before. And they had finally said, we had enough. We're going to take the law in our own hands. And I know there's terrible discussions about that. Yeah. Were they right? Were they wrong? What were they trying to do? Et cetera, et cetera. And my close friend, Tim Gallego, and I have had many discussions about that, that whole thing. I mean, we all come at these things from different angles. And that sort of led to my involvement with civil rights. I was on the advisory committee for 30 years to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
It seems like part of your ministry then has been about social justice and civil rights. But in dealing with those tough issues and these movements and these protests and these different social actions that were happening, you developed a relationship, and you mentioned it earlier, but you developed a relationship with Native Americans through their use of humor. And when you're not a part of the community and you don't really get the humor, you just don't get it. But once you're in it and you get it and you feel it, then it becomes a part of you. So could you talk to us a little bit about your relationship through the humor?
Well, eventually, on the advice of Bobby Kennedy Jr., I opened up Dakota Travel. And I said, I got a lot of friends in the Indian community. I wonder if they need a travel agent. And sure enough, Pine Ridge and Rosebud and Cheyenne, Eagle Butte, I began to serve them. And I'd always buy donuts at Wall Drug and take them to all the administrators, all women.
Yeah.
You know, they basically support the administration and those reservations, all great sense of humor. And at that same time, we had Arlene O'Leary from Timber Lake, who was Native American, and she took care of our baby, and wonderful sense of humor. I mean, it was such a joy to come home and interact with Arlene, and it was such a joy to go to the various reservations, because I sensed the sense of humor there that, you know, Western Europeans, Eastern Europeans were pretty strict.
Yeah.
And but they do have a wonderful sense of humor.
Definitely. Some of these things are so harsh that we need to smile and laugh through it. So, Mr. Walsh, we're going to take a break. We'll be back after a short break.
Look into my eyes, you will see what you mean to me. Don't tell me it's not worth trying for. You know it's true. Everything I do it for you. Everything I do it for you.
More than 2 million men and women have served in our military since 9/11. Now, many of them are transitioning back into civilian life. They're considering career options, writing resumes, starting businesses. ACP AdvisorNet can help. ACP AdvisorNet is a nonprofit online community where Americans can offer career advice to those who have served. Now we can serve those who served us by helping them to find their next career. Visit acpadvisornet.org.
Hi, welcome back to Oyate Today. Once again, our guest tonight is Mr. Bill Walsh. Thank you so much for being here, sir. This has been an awesome discussion.
Yeah.
Now, in Rapid City, you have the Black Hills Forum and Press Club, and that's a monthly meeting which many of the stakeholders from Rapid City and the area come to meet, and you have different guest speakers. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, Steve Westlock, who headed up the Pennington County Republican Party at one time, he and I used to have coffee together. And he's a conservative Republican, I'm a liberal Democrat. Never had any problem with that. And we said, well, if we can sit and have coffee together and break a roll together, why can't we do that with a larger group? And that's how it all started. It's an attempt to bring people together, specifically a lot of leaders in our community, hopefully Native Americans like Tim and Gallego and others, to get them involved in some type of civil discussion.
Sure.
You know, there's always been the tension between white Americans and Native Americans, always tension between Republicans and Democrats. The whole idea is to sit down, you're a human being, I'm a human being. We don't have that much indifference in what we're trying to achieve. And that sort of came out of a group that I put together maybe 10 years ago with white people that had retired as CEOs. And we sat down with Native Americans who were in business. And this was at the old Ramada Inn here in Rapid City. And we sort of used these guys as mentors to a lot of the Native Americans who didn't have a game plan, you know, and that type of thing, not only in private business, but also in tribal business and state South Dakota business. I mean, because you guys are citizens of 3 countries.
Sure.
The tribe, the state, and the U.S., United States of America. And it was very successful. And we broke bread, I don't know, almost for 4 years. I thought we were going to be over in a year. But everything has its time. So then we transitioned from that to the forum. And now Marnie Herman has taken the place of Steve Westlock. And one of the great forums that we had, and I wish the media had covered it a little closer, was a year ago, November, in which we had all law enforcement panel with Native American panel. And we want to follow that form this summer or early fall and get you guys up there and talk about the media, how the media is presenting both the warts of Native Americans and the halos of Native Americans.
Sure.
And I think basically, you know, we're doing a heck of a better job now than we've done in years past, largely due to a lot of efforts on the part of Native Americans, as well as great leaders like our mayor, Steve Allender, and Tom's head of the Sheriff's Department, and Carl, the head of the Police Department. I think we've made tremendous progress. But we have Native Americans showing up at that, and we continue to tell everybody, hey, listen, it's $20 a lunch, but if you can't afford it, let me know. I'll pick up your tab.
It's a great lunch, though. I love your guys' lunch you have over there. I've been there, yeah. And I think Oyate today has played a major role in how we're kind of interpreting Native American culture and Native American culture to our viewers, and really opening a lot of doors and a lot of communication between.
And that's what it's all about. It's communication and really recognizing the fact that, you know, I come from Irish Bohemian culture and you come from a Native American culture, and we're all trying to do what's right and being human beings, you know.
When do you guys meet then?
We meet again both in February 22nd at the Hilton Gardens Inn at basically 11:30 to 1 o'clock, and we try to cut it off right at 1 o'clock because a lot of these people have to go back to their businesses, etc. And it'll be on the 22nd of the month, both in February and March.
Okay.
And we invite people to come and give us your email if you haven't been there before, so that we can alert you to the other subjects coming up. So in February, we're going to have Elevate South Dakota.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Mr. Walsh, thank you so much for coming on our show tonight. It's been fun.
Yeah.
I want to thank our producers. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Prairie Edge for hosting our show tonight. And I want to thank you for making Oyate today a part of your night.
You've been watching Oyate Today, brought to you by Native Sun News Today.